finally wearing off. I'm able to start talking again. I think I should start getting into a rotation. What do you think?
I think that's a good thing to do.
Well, then let's jump into the rotation. It is a gorgeous Sunday over here in Tampa, and we have an absolutely fabulous guest today. But first, let's go ahead and introduce ourselves. There's a missing component here, but we're going to talk about him in effigy anyway. First off, I was actually thinking, because now we got matching polo shirts that are, by the way, hemp cloth. Very, very breathable, very nice. Mine actually smells like Aramis. I don't know why. But I was thinking of changing our names to Bewitched, Bothered, and Bewildered. What do you think?
I don't know about that. Who's bothered? Am I bothered?
Well, that's what we're going to figure out. I guess we'll kind of work on that. Anyways, my name is Gary Bewitched Stein, and I am the political director here for Suncoast Normal and the Master of Public Health. And to my right, your left, is our deputy director, Carlos Angel Bewildered Ermita. And he is also our engineer and jack of all trades. And I think you owe me one trade.
I just want to say, Gary, you bewitch me with your words.
Absolutely. And missing from the secret square above us, because for some odd reason, he just found out that he was allergic to squid ink, which I think is fine.
In a minute, though.
Is there any other kind of inks that he actually eats
this morning?
Okay, but apparently he has an allergy to that, so he kind of got all blued up. Anyway, and that is our Carlos. That is Chris Keno, our executive director and master of business of public administration, and of course he's up there hitting them all below the belt while living above the beltway. And our guest, and I'm very, very excited to introduce him, is Mr. Steve Bloom, who is one of the icons of the industry, former editor of HighTimes magazine and a number of other publications, not to be mentioned. But we will mention the fact that he is currently has a fantastic website for great news and information, Celeb Stoner, without the S.
Your resume is absolutely impressive, may I say. You've written for like everything about marijuana.
I was thinking of putting graphics in the middle of your bio so that people will read it to the end, because they always like looking at pictures first, you know. And you had that fantastic picture of you holding LV Musika's arm, and you were sitting there with Jack Hare and Woody Harrelson, and I just love that shot. That's a fanboy shot right there.
That was from the HighTimes 25th anniversary party.
And LV looked like she was having a good time. Not that she doesn't always, but she was definitely having a good time there. We kind of miss her because she moved from Florida. I guess she's in Oregon now.
She's been there for years now. Much better weed.
Well, she's been existing on the government weed, which she told me she was breaking away from because of just the fact that powdered, freeze-dried, and moldy.
She doesn't use it anymore. She stopped. She pretty much is out of the program. You know, there's only one person left, I think, Urban Roosevelt.
Yep. Yeah.
I don't even know if Urban's getting his.
Florida.
I don't even know if Urban's getting his weed anymore from the government. You know, who wants that shit?
Yeah,
I tried it once. I was incredibly underimpressed.
I remember one time, sitting at an activist gathering. LB was there. LB took out her prescription bottle, but passed some joints around. Nobody would touch it. She was being nice. Everybody's like, everybody. I don't think so.
And friend of the show and researcher extraordinaire Sue Sicily has always told us that the product that she got from University of Mississippi was sub-research grade. And she said, and that's putting it very, very nicely.
Right.
I mean, how could she do a research project on PTSD with veterans using it as a smokable when the stuff is not smokable?
Exactly.
Essentially, again, she said the product was ground, freeze-dried, and moldy. And it contained pieces of stems and seeds. And I did better at that, separating the stuff with my double albums back in the 80s.
Well, LB, complained that a few years back, she was getting such low THC cannabis that it damaged her glaucoma even worse. And she had to have more surgeries. So she blamed the government on having additional problems that she already had because they were providing such bad weed.
Well, my wife has now lost her eyesight, but she had a severe chronic glaucoma that occurred after a retinal detachment. And she found that CBG actually was the component that actually reduce the intraocular pressure properly. And so if you have a product with high CBG, she's good for it. She doesn't have to get the euphoric out of it. She just wants to get out of her pain.
Do they allow for glaucoma in Florida as a condition?
It is.
Okay.
New
York.
We are woefully short of qualifying conditions, though.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
It's like kind of the original condition that people were using cannabis for, glaucoma and cancer. And it's amazing to me that any state would not allow people to use cannabis for glaucoma legally. It's backwards. People don't allow that.
I was the kid, one of the kids who used it basically as a recreational thing. As close to advocacy as I got was when I would go to the hemp fest just to see if John Sinclair would show up. Unfortunately,
were you in Ann Arbor, or where are you talking about?
In Ann Arbor, yeah, because I was going to Michigan State University at the time.
Okay. You mean Hash Bash?
Yeah, the Hash Bash. Unfortunately, in 1979, I got paraquatted from something that was in a rotation over there at the Hash Bash. But that was that time.
What happened? What do you mean? What happened?
What's paraquatted?
Go ahead.
Fungus, whatever. It's an aerial spray that they were using in Mexico on cannabis.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, and they actually sprayed it so that they figured if they got the word out that people would stop using cannabis because they'd be afraid it would have paraquat in it. But we had no idea what had it in it, what didn't have it in it. Somebody said it made it look more yellow, but then again, a lot of us were smoking Thai stick anyway, so we didn't know what was what. But there was actually an advertisement in the college newspaper saying, "Do you think your weed has paraquat in it? Send us a sample of your stash with a self-stamped, self-addressed envelope, and we will send you back the results to let you know." I don't think anybody fell for that.
That's part of the reason why Normal had a falling out with the White House over the paraquat issue. Keith Strzok was so upset with the White House that he pretty much didn't really care about what ultimately happened, the scandal that kind of tore things apart, the cocaine scandal. I think his attitude was like, I'm so mad at the government now, I don't really care what they have to say. I'm going to out, their drug czar.
Keith is a great guy, but he always seems like he's always angry. But he's got great hair.
So
he pre-smarts the white hair better than anybody else I know.
You can't say anything bad about Keith Strzok on this rotation. Come on, it's the Normal show.
Oh, he takes it. To make him smile is just a joy. Yeah.
Okay.
So, Steve, I just want to switch gears for a moment here. I want to talk really the heart of everything that we do at Normal, and which is activism work.
Yeah.
And I really want to thank you, because the way I look at activism is really just the spreading of true information. And you play a big part of that. You've written about cannabis longer than most folks, have done most things. And I would first off want to thank you for putting good info out there about marijuana, right? And second, I want to take some time to kind of think about like yellow journalism and some like atrocious things that have come out. What is the most audacious thing you've ever heard about cannabis?
Well, first of all, I prefer green journalism, but
green journalism. I like it.
Can I use that?
There's so many myths and lies about cannabis. Where do you begin?
Yeah, what is the craziest thing you've ever heard? Nothing coming up
there with the fact that they're saying that cannabis now makes mass shooters.
What is it? Men will grow breasts, I think was one of those. Well, there's just so the problem is that it continues to today. There's a sort of another round of reefer madness now that legalization is happening, and all the people who are opposed to it, want to scare people. Okay, well, now that cannabis is legal in so many places, this is all the bad things that are going to happen to you. You're going to have heart attacks, you're going to have this, you're going to have that. And I mean, there's just so much science. Paul Armentano is constantly writing about all these things, but he tries to focus on the positive. There's so many negative scientific reports that have come out in the last few years. I'm galled by that, because that's the stuff that really influences people.
I really am appalled when I see politicians spreading bad information. I feel like in today's day and age, if you don't like if you're not educated, then really that's on you. You have information so readily available at your fingertips. I mean, my phone right now can, I can Google things about cannabis and find out what it's legal.
Unfortunately, you have
He often does.
at your fingertips too, so you have to be careful what you're reading.
Yeah, I mean that's very true. But I mean, I really do it's hard for a politician now to look at stories of medical marijuana with kids and with how it affects veterans and things like that, and really say like this is not useful. I really find politicians that are pushing back on legalization to be completely ignorant at this point, not just bad and poorly informed, right?
Now, I have a friend of mine who had once said to me that the fake news was actually a Mexican import in regards to cannabis is concerned, because they actually started doing it in Mexico first, and then we took with the reins and brought it over here. But we've had a lot of fake news even since the beginning of our country.
Putin is the purveyor of fake news. That's where Trump got it all. Just lie about everything. Never ever tell the truth, ever.
But our founding fathers, when they first started doing elections, already started doing fake news and putting out reports. Like Jefferson was an alcoholic. Well, he was. No, he was. But I think he was an atheist. So that's bad enough. but those kind of things have begun since the beginning of politics, unfortunately. I think political fake news is some of the most hurtful out there, because it influences people.
How can we differentiate between fake news and good news?
Well, I don't like the term fake news. That's a Trump term, but I refuse to use it. To me, there's no such thing. But it's sources. Somebody posted an article yesterday from Newsweek. I don't think Newsweek is a reliable source these days. They're a conservative organization. Don't trust anything that Newsweek posts. Everybody looks at Fox and questions everything Fox does. That's obvious. You have to look a little deeper than Fox News is where the negative stories are coming from. So you just be careful on your sources.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my grandfather used to always say, only read the forward, because that's where all the good news comes from. But I saw him looking at Life magazine quite a few times. But you absolutely check your sources. I mean, even a Wikipedia article, go to the sources and see where they're actually getting their information from.
Wikipedia is pretty reliable.
Yeah, I think so too. What do you think is the most reliable source for cannabis, other than the obvious celeb stoner?
Would you mind putting that at the bottom there? There you go.
There are a lot of great cannabis sites out there. Marijuana Moment, Leafy, Mary Jane, Green Market Report, all my favorites. That I go to all the time. I got out there a little early and I beat a lot of them, but they've caught up to me, and now they're doing great reporting. So there's a lot of great cannabis news sites out there to get tremendous information. We're sort of at a great point. Whether people are making a good living doing is another thing, but people are putting out a lot of great information.
Yeah, I checked out celebstoner.com, and I noticed that you had posted on your homepage links to several different sources that just put out excellent information on cannabis.
So tell us what was the spark? What was the genesis that brought you from just being your average guy to being the far above average guy in green journalism?
All right, well, thanks for asking that. Sort of a long story. My long and winding road to HighTimes started really started when I was 15, smoking pot when I first started. And we just dug it, listened to music, and when I started to go to concerts, and music and concerts and smoking all kind of went together. Sort of post-Woodstock kid, kind of woke up around 1970 after Woodstock, as I'm old enough to remember all that stuff. And my interest in music led me to become a music journalist. I also played some music a little bit myself, but wasn't quite good enough to really be a musician. I'm self-taught on saxophone. I played trumpet in school. My dad taught me jazz. I had an interest. I grew up with the Beatles. But I went through the whole classic rock period through the late 60s into early 70s, and I steered kind of away from that into R&B, funk, and soul, and started covering that extensively. I got the start of my career in 1978, basically covering R&B, and I kind of snuck into a publication in New York that everybody was writing about punk, and I was the only one writing about R&B. So I got in the door there and started writing that way. And one thing led to another, and I met a guy named John Holmstrom, who was a cartoonist and the editor of Punk magazine, and he got a job up at HighTimes, and about 1985, 86, and we were friends. And he kept in touch with me and started inviting me up to the office to do a few things like proofread, write an article. And one day he gave me a call and they said they were looking for a news editor. And did I want the job? And I was actually writing a book at the time on basketball. And I said, well, I need a few months to finish off. And he said, sure. So I started there in October 88. First issue was January 89. Now, going to HighTimes, I mean, I just came in there as an editor, somebody who knew how to, put together stories, edit stories. I didn't have much knowledge of what HighTimes was doing. I didn't really read HighTimes much growing up. I was a student of new journalism, Hunter Thompson, Jack Kerouac, or, that kind of writing. And I kind of, I was more of a Rolling Stone Village Voice guy and kind of missed HighTimes, picked up a couple of issues over the years, but really hadn't read HighTimes. And I realized once I got there how much I missed, because the first 5 years were really spectacular. And after that was pretty good too, but the first 5 years were really, really dynamic. From 74 to 78, HighTimes kind of lifted off like a rocket. And it really was kind of like Rolling Stone, HighTimes, Playboy, kind of representing the sex, drugs, and rock and roll kind of era. HighTimes was the part of the drugs. And back then, HighTimes didn't distinguish so much between one drug or the other. Cannabis was number one, but cocaine was number two. And cocaine was highlighted in the magazine quite a bit. The one thing HighTimes wouldn't do is they wouldn't steer towards like opioids and heroin and things like that. That was a no-no. So that was pretty much how I got involved there. And so one thing, as I was news editor, I just learned a lot. I started to go to the normal conferences and met everybody. I started to meet all the who's who of people in cannabis. I went to the hemp tour events in Ann Arbor. I went everywhere. I went to every event. I was the guy who needed to be at all these events and meeting everybody. So that's really where I got myself going there. And after a couple of years of doing the news editing and kind of learning what I needed to know, then the editor at the time, Steve Hager, said, hey, you want to go back and do your music stuff a little bit more. We kind of need a little more culture in the magazine. I was already doing a little music, but not too much of it at HighTimes. So I steered towards that, and I created a section that was more of an arts and entertainment section, became the news editor, entertainment editor, and shifted my gears towards music and celebrity coverage.
You ever have a chance to check out Tommy Chong's musical career just prior to his evolution into comedy with Cheech?
Yeah, I'm well aware of that. Tommy was on Motown, and the name is just escaping me for a second, but Taylor and the Vancouvers, I'm forgetting his first name, Bobby Taylor and the Vancouvers. Does Your Mama Know About Me? Tommy wrote this song that was a hit song in I think 68, 69. He was a guitarist in the band. He was the only non-black guy in the band. Tommy is from Alberta, from Calgary. He moved to Vancouver. But he had hooked up and started playing music already with, non-white, band there, and kind of connected. So Tommy always kind of dove in to the other side. I think he told me because, he was, he was half Chinese, and he was always looked as a little weird kid growing up in Canada. Like, his background was a little strange for everybody there. So I think he steered him a little bit more towards the black crowd and hanging out with them. And that may have led to his cannabis use, but yeah, then he ended up in Vancouver, and with Bobby Taylor and the Vancouvers, he has great stories about being on Motown. He only had a short period on Motown because he couldn't cross back and forth between Canada and the States easily. He was having problems crossing, and so he had to leave the group because of that. But he was on like Motown bus tours with the Supremes and the Jackson 5. He helped the Jackson 5 get signed. Jackson 5, Michael Jackson's father went to Tommy and gave him the contract and said, take a look at this contract. Is it okay? So Tommy's got a lot of great Motown history.
Yeah, we had him on the show a couple of months ago, and we were able to get 1 hour for him, and he gave us 2.
Well, he loves to talk.
Yeah, he does. we had a fantastic time. A bucket list for me, absolutely, to get a chance to talk with him. And
I love the guy. I've had the opportunity to do a one-on-one interview with him at some conferences, and I have a program with him, like a 45-minute program. It's kind of scripted, and show a scene from Up in Smoke, and play Dave's Not Here, and play the Bobby Taylor song. Every time I play that Bobby Taylor song, I haven't done it with him for a few years. He gets like tears in his eyes.
Oh yeah, because that was a definite milestone.
It really brings him back to another time in his life, pre-Cheech and Chong. Nobody knew who he was. One thing led to another, but that was the early part of his career. And then he, was working at a a nightclub in Vancouver, and one Cheech had come up to Vancouver because he was evading the draft, and one thing led to another, and those guys met, and they kind of, the spark clicked, and they started performing at this burlesque kind of place where Tommy was running. And after a while they decided to come to the States. I guess Cheech felt he could come back into the US, but they came in around 70, 71, then moved to LA, and Tommy's been there ever since.
And we hope to have him on, which we're also trying to get somebody else that you've been involved with, and that is Woody Harrelson.
He's a little harder to access, but Woody's got a business now in California, so he's got reason to hype his stuff. So maybe you'll be able to get him, but Woody's a little harder to get.
I heard a commercial for Harrelson's Own, and I'm guessing that's him.
That's his brother.
That's his brother. Okay, along with Woodland, I guess is his new brand.
The Woods.
The Woods. That is interesting to me, and I wanted to ask you about this because when I worked hard on getting the cannabis industry to become legal here in the state of Florida, I was doing it strictly on the basis of the fact that I have my background in public health. I already knew, that folks like Kathy Jordan existed who had been with ALS for the last 30 years, and that itself was a miracle, and that this actually was a medicine, and we were going forward, and we were trying to push the medical program and all that bit. So it was a different time and all that bit. And I forgot where I was going to go. That's what happens when I just ramble like that.
Steve, when we were talking to Tommy, he gave us a story about his experience here in Florida. He actually got arrested and everything. But you recently came to Florida. You were a part of some conferences that we had here. And you got to see what was going on in Florida. I just, have to ask, man. You're an OG in the game, and you had to have in the 80s an idea of where you wanted cannabis to end up, right? And here we are.
Now I got my track back in place, but go ahead, keep talking.
Here we are. Are you excited about what you saw in Florida? Are you excited about things to come? Maybe. Are you upset that we haven't made that much progress out here? Can you give us a critique of what's going on in Florida?
Sure. Well, Florida is a medical state, and it's a successful medical state, I'd say. The problem in Florida is it's dominated by a handful of companies, Trulieve, and it's kind of the indicator that the corporate world is going to run cannabis pretty much as we know it, and there's not a lot of room for independent sellers and companies, and it seems to be the case in Florida. But it's a very strong medical market, to say the least. There's dispensaries everywhere, and it seems like everybody I know down there can go into one of those stores and pick up what they want. So the access seems to be pretty good, as far as I know. I could be wrong, but I didn't hear anybody complaining that they couldn't get their hands on quality cannabis while they're down there, in the state. So, I see that as happening. As far as on the, the legal, the recreational side, it's a problem. That obviously it'd be nice to get that going. Usually in states that, have had medical for quite a while, it does lead to recreational. People see that it works. People see the revenues, the taxes. It doesn't really cause problems in communities. So why not move and allow everybody access instead of just patients? So it's inevitable to happen in Florida. I'm not really sure what's holding it up, but I actually know what's holding it up. The court system's holding it up in Florida. They blocked a ballot initiative, I think, till 2024, which is sad. But where a lot of other states might be moving in that direction towards recreational legalization this year with ballot initiatives, Florida won't be one of them. So that's too bad. So I see that as problematic, that Florida has to kind of wait when others are moving ahead. And it's just not about being a patient. It's about just being a user and somebody who wants to access cannabis legally without having to go to your dealer or something, which is not a bad thing. But some people don't even have a dealer, so they want to just be able to walk into a store and have easy access. Why not? So I think Florida is a little behind the times when it comes to that, but it'll have to catch up.
I have an expression that patients are medical users and MSOs are just users. But because that seems to be the problem. Now, I can say that one thing that Trulieve has done, besides being the first out of the gate, is they really did set the bar low for everybody. so that as soon as the first quality product comes through, we'll really see it. No, I'm messing
Well,
with you.
are they supportive
We
of
love those
normal?
guys.
Are they supportive of
What?
normal? Are they truly supportive of normal and normal's efforts?
Yes.
Well, that's good.
Although the person who can give out more insight on that is coming up too.
Not necessarily our chapter, but
No.
but normal Florida chapter.
See, we don't fit the corporate mold. Yeah, I think Trulieve has the franchise on mold anyway.
Well,
But-
yeah, there you go. But but at the same time, they do have a deal with Black Tuna, Bob Platshorn, so that, that's kind of cool that they're working with an activist like him. So there's the pros and cons. I hear negatives when I'm down in Florida. I hear negatives around Trulieve. They don't participate in the events that I was at. So maybe they will, or maybe they're not invited because they're too big and they don't want them to sort of dominate the floor, so to speak, with a 2,000-foot booth or something.
Not necessarily to pick on any individual MMTC. We've done that enough already in the show.
Yes, we have. And that's why we don't have sponsors.
Yeah, that's why we don't get sponsors. But I mean, it's just to really look at Florida as a whole. I mean, it's really, like, my critique about the cannabis here is that yes, it is readily available because like you said, that there's just a few players. Prices are way too high, man. And it's breaking my bank to be able to medicate.
What's the standard, say, gram price that you would be paying in Florida in the legal?
Yeah,
market?
let me pull up a website and look.
The average eighth is between 55 maybe.
Let's see here.
Well, that's still too expensive. What you need is the decline in prices in places like Oregon and Colorado. That it's putting a lot of people out of business because they're not making as much money as they anticipated. But honestly, going into the cannabis industry thinking you're going to be selling weed for 400 an ounce, you're not being realistic. It's going to go down. It's one of the few products where prices go down, not up. And it should, because it's been it's been inflated for so long because of prohibition and because of so many hands that touch the product until it gets into your hands, and everybody's adding a little markup. And next thing you know, you have your $400 or $500 weed, when it really should be worth what they're really selling it for now in places like Oregon, like 50 and 100.
I don't know if you ever had a chance to meet Captain Hooters over in Amsterdam, but he's the guy who always told me that if the guy is giving you your buds and he's picking it up with his fingers like that, put it back and walk to the next booth. So they should be handling it with tongs. He says, get your fingers off of my buds because that's what I'm paying for, and I don't want the terpenes still stuck on your fingers.
So
I leave here.
I pulled up a website, and I'm not going to say what MMTC it is, but I've found an eighth for as much as $53.
I've seen eighths for $80.
Typically $43 though. Like, that's the average I see on there, $43.
That's that's less than 300 an ounce. I mean, it's getting down there, better than 50 and 60.
Yeah, I guess we have seen some progress here in Florida, and I think that talking about progress is a good way to bring in our next guests onto the show here.
Yeah, we're actually going to have a segment here because we do every week highlight a candidate for the upcoming election. Better know a candidate or candidate spotlight, whichever you wish.
Whichever one, but let's cue that music.
Absolutely. This is embarrassing. We have this great new intro, and as soon as we do, he drops off.
Yeah, literally brought him on, and then he dropped off. Well, there he is.
There you go. So I'm not going to make a comment about the fact that
Hi, Mike.
The Republicans cut him on because he did come back.
Yeah, you did that, and it disappeared for me. I was like, "What's going on?" Hey, Mr. Bloom, pleasure to see you.
Hey, Michael, how are you?
Great.
So we have here Mr. Mike Minardi, who has been a giant in Florida advocacy in regards to cannabis for many, many years, and has a remarkable resemblance to Dave Bautista, only a little bit skinnier. Who's, by the way, a Tampa resident, so we can kid Dave. But right now, Mike is going to a new level in his life and going from cannabis advocacy and the best only cannabis trial lawyer in the state that includes jury trials, and going into the state legislature where all the sausage is made and usually spoils.
Well, yeah, it's an insane and it's crazier than running the Regulate Florida campaign, but excited for it. And, it's just a cool step to be able to continue to reform these laws and to, legalize cannabis in Florida. And I'm really excited about it, and hopefully we can get up there and make some change. And tomorrow, Gary, something that you and I have been working on, and I know you've continued to work on legislatively, but I'm filing a brief in the first DCA regarding a Department of Corrections officer who was fired for his cannabis use. So finally putting that challenge to the appellate courts. I love to see it, and we think it has great traction.
I mean, we've already gotten DC to go ahead and remove their restrictions in regards to workplace and cannabis, and we worked together on that bill that I've been pushing for the last couple of years. We got it filed, and once again, never even got to committee.
Yep.
So we're hoping that you can get in there and get positioned and get that sucker into committee so they can at least get the conversation going. And that if somebody is a worker who is a person with a disability or having a disabling condition, he should be under the ADA and be allowed accommodations. And so therefore, you should be allowed to use it as long as it doesn't affect performance.
Yeah, it's Florida Disabilities Act, and we're hoping that if we can't get it done through the legislature, that this case will do it for us. Arguing that the language of our amendment requires employers to accommodate off-site use. So really excited about it.
Mike, you might want to check your letting. It looks like one of those anonymous interviews where we're going to have to change your voice too. There you go, even better. Okay, so what made you decide to go ahead and take the plunge and go into the campaign mode?
Well, honestly, and you guys have known me forever. When I was in law school, I wrote an article about the 3 ways to legalize cannabis through the court system. We've been doing that and trying to do that as much as possible throughout the state and country. Number 2, through the ballot initiative, we're obviously working on that and praying that everyone on here signs the Regulate Florida petition. It just does, permits home cultivation and legalizes it for all adults to possess, use, and have 21 plus. And so the only other way I can do it is through the legislature. So, that's always been my main goal and my major impetus to do this. So
one of the biggest questions we get asked constantly over and over again is, when are we going to see full legalization and decriminalization in Florida? And I tell people, it depends on the path. So the question is, which path do you think will finally come to the finish line in 2020?
I have no idea. I'm hoping at a minimum, because personally, I think if it's done legislatively, we will never have home cultivation in Florida. Even if I'm up there to create that in our legislature would be extremely difficult task. So I really think that it has to be through the ballot box.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we just need money and people to sign it. And I know it's a huge lift, but it just got to be done, and we the people can do it. That's our power.
How important do you think it is for the governor to be like-minded to move this forward?
I think it's extremely important, and Governor Desantis, even though I'm part of the R party, there's a few things that we do not agree on, and the cannabis obviously is one of them. In one of the early articles when we relaunched Regulate, I think he was quoted as "not on my watch."
Yeah.
So
the latest one was that he didn't want to legalize because it smelled bad. The putrid odor, I think, was the way it was. And it's like, come on, dude. Are you supporting DeSantis for governor?
I am.
So how can we see any progress under DeSantis?
Well, I don't think either whether or not DeSantis is there in 2022 that our legislature would legalize cannabis. So I don't think that's, as Gary said, we can't even get hearings on these types of issues. Never mind.
One thing I remember, and I believe you were actually, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you were a part of this press conference when DeSantis first was in office. and smoking was legal in our system. And I believe you were part of that, right? So DeSantis, it was John Morgan and yourself,
And
I
Matt Gaetz.
remember and Matt Gaetz, and I remember DeSantis specifically talking about the cartel. Like, I remember that coming out of his mouth. And we were discussing with Steve here earlier about like really like this how there's very few players in the industry. That's really the worst part of our industry here. Do you think DeSantis would try to open things up? I don't think he's done anything about that.
You know, it's an interesting question because depends on, you know, why he did that and why he's done a few different things. We know that, you know, there's a lot of money going around in politics in this industry. There's probably still multiple investigations going on as to this industry. We know, you know, what has happened with certain players, not necessarily related to this industry, but we've heard the FBI tapes of things that were said. So, you know, and that was weeks after our Florida Supreme Court came out and said that there wasn't a special law, you know, that's a big irony there. And I don't think people saw that, but, you know, it was a couple months after our Florida Supreme Court came out and denied the floor grown decision, you know, and said the and versus or, and even in their cultivation decision was, you know, a long stretch, I think, as to,
the word use came in.
You know, I do think at that time we all believed that he was going to break up the now 23 licenses we have, and hopefully there will be another 22, potentially 26 issued within the next, you know, 9 months to a year. But it's still, you know, an extremely small industry, and that's really why I think the big equalizer is home cultivation.
You know, we had another strange session this last year where it was almost entirely taken up by a culture war, essentially. And I had written, we had written and pushed forward 7 different bills, and we actually got one piece of one bill brought into the amendment for the Department of Health, and that is to make certain that if you are a MMTC with a license, and at the end of 2 years you are not fully cultivating to scale, then you lose your license. Because we had too many people in that closed market we have that were just sitting on their licenses, not doing anything, just waiting for adult use to happen. And now all of a sudden, Jungle Boys is stepping up, and all the other people who had zeros next to their numbers are suddenly starting to cultivate. So I'm glad we were able to move that forward and change the industry a little bit.
Well, realize those were the people that bought in for $50 million. That none of them at this point, you know, we've tried to reach out to all of them about getting them on board with home cultivation and home grow. So it goes back to your first statement, I think, which you said about the dispensary. So,
yeah, the dispensaries. Well, I know that True Leaf has actually stated that they were in favor of home grow. I know that Kim was talking about getting clones ready to sell in the back of the shop. Hopefully, she wasn't selling any in the back of the shop at the time.
You know, and that's really the thing that I wish they would see, is that it's just different SKUs on their shelves that they can sell. You know, a small portion of each state, people in states actually home cultivate, you know, 3%. And then even if 5% try, then they'll learn that they can't, you know, really do it that well. But at least people should have the option and be able to cultivate their own, not have to worry about the rest. And we just need to legalize. We got to stop persecuting people for cannabis. It's ridiculous. And cops should have to go after, you know, violent criminals as opposed to, you know, cannabis users. So
one topic that we were about to breach in our conversation with Steve is that we when we started this law here in the state of Florida, I guess didn't really see the corporate tsunami coming up behind us, and the MSOs and all the other corporate attitudes towards the plant that you never got from the guy in the corner who was selling you a 16-ounce bag of brickweed, which is where I started out. But the fact now you've got this corporate attitude towards constant expansion, constant push towards profitability. And right now, actually, they're in a stance of contraction as far as prices are concerned. They're constantly putting in sales because they realize that wasn't working. Do you see more changes in the industry in regards to the patients versus profit situation?
Well, you know, the interesting thing I am hearing from doctors throughout the state and nurses is that there's less renewals. People aren't renewing as much as they are. So most of this rolls that we're seeing still going up is new patients and not as many people renewing as they expected. So I think, they're going to have to continue to change things. Another thing that I would push for that you and I had worked on for a while is the reciprocity issue. But if there's another 24, 22 at a minimum right now, right? We have the black farmers license, which should be issued, I would assume, by the end of August, for my count of days. And then technically the other 22, potentially 26 licenses as we get up to 800,000 patients. If those are actually issued, I mean, it's going to totally change the market. It may take them a couple of years to get up and running, and that new law will prevent them from sitting on their license. But, at least it'll significantly expand the market. And if we do that with our petition and legalization, I think that they're all going to make tons of money. None of them have to worry about it.
I have in here in this Beetlejuice shaped weed jar the name of the guy who actually won the Pigford license. As you can see, it's empty. That is because of the fact that even though the applications actually came out in March, that was that deadline, from what I understand, they're still at the level of just vetting the 12 applicants and not actually scoring the applications themselves. What have you heard about what's going on over there?
So I haven't, but statutorily, they had 30 days from I heard there was 13 license applications, so I don't know really what's taking them that long. I know they're understaffed. They had 30 days from receipt of the application to go through phase one. Then I think it was 75 days for phase two, which was the evaluators evaluating the application, and then 30 days for the department to tally the scores and stuff. So, my count was that they had 135 days from, the last day was March 21st. So typically you wouldn't count that day. You start on that next Monday, or 24th, I think, was that Friday of the week. So that's why I said the end of August, because I think that's around the 135 day mark.
I mean, they're definitely slow walking this, and that's why I'm not expecting to see all those licenses come flooding in anytime soon, because this whole process, for whatever reason, is being hindered and slowed down. Any idea why that's happening?
I don't know. When you buy into a market for $55 million, I don't know if you want to see competitors around sooner rather than later.
And that's the standard, not even the upgraded model. I mean, for $55 million, you get a tract of land and a couple of clones you can grow in the middle of it.
I don't even think you get that, Gary. I think it's a piece of paper, man.
It is. People have bought. Planet 13 bought the old Harvest license for $55 million, piece of paper, stock only deal, I do believe. And congratulations, you got yourself a certificate.
And don't get me wrong, I think there's plenty of money to go around for these people, especially as we move towards legalization. I mean, these people, I think their biggest fear is probably, that they wouldn't be able to come up with demand and supply enough cannabis for the people in the state of Florida.
Now, Jeff Brandis has always told me that the folks in the House are basically working kind of like a military situation where it's very, very top-down leadership, where basically the Democrats fall in love and the Republicans fall in line. And the Senate, of course, is like 40 Somalian warlords all trying to figure out who's going to jive for position. So how do you see yourself getting into the House and making changes? Can you change leadership's mind?
Well, just like everything, it's all about education. Is a new speaker coming in, obviously, this session. Who I think will be a little bit more open to at least discussing this issue and talking about it. So, we get in and we start educating, Gary, and that's one of the biggest things that I think that there is not enough of up in Tallahassee. And I love the legislators that support cannabis, but as they are not necessarily as intertwined and as knowledgeable about it. Even talking to them about hemp, there's probably a small percentage of them that don't even know what hempcrete is. I know when I was talking to people. They had no idea all the different uses of the plant and stuff like that. So it's about education. I want to clean up our waterways with hemp. I want to really create an industrial program here for hemp. I want to see plastics. I want to see, biofuels. I support hemp for water. I really want to push that agenda. It's both an environmental agenda, it's a pro-cannabis agenda, and, it's a freedom agenda, realistically.
So are you a moderate or a libertarian? I know. How would you place yourself along the spectrum?
So I think I am a Republican libertarian. I believe in freedom among all else, and that we have to continue to push towards that, and safety and education. That's it.
And I know your district changed a little bit because you had to jump from one district to the other. So what is your district now, so people will know where they have to be to vote for you, and whether they want to go ahead and build a house in your district just so they can vote for you?
Yeah, we're District 65 in Tampa. So it's South Tampa, West Shore, West Chase area, hugs the 275 lane. People can go to our website, Minority for Florida, volunteer and help us out and get out and knock on doors and see people and pamphlet and put signs out in their yards and things like that. At a minimum, we need someone in the Republican Party in the primary that's supporting, this issue. Both of my candidates are not as supportive of this issue at all. Definitely not supporting legalization, not able to work across, party lines to work with Democrats on issues. Because we've been doing that for so long. I said it the other day at the Tiger Bay Club. I don't know if you were there yet, but I was like, I've been stealthily working with the Democrats for years, on the cannabis issues. But, it's I'm from a live free or die state. So
yeah, I was there stealthily most of the time. I just couldn't afford lunch. So I just hung back and listened to all the speeches. There were some great speeches. And I definitely see you being positioned better than your candidates at this point, your primary opponents at this point in time. So we wish you the best of luck. And once again, do we have the link to show for where do you go ahead and donate to him or find his website?
If he tells me it, I can.
Yeah, it's Minority for Florida, the number for Florida. And Gary, if you want, I'll send you the brief that we're filing after we file it tomorrow on the employment case. So
I live for playing with briefs. Absolutely.
Right there.
Yeah.
Steve, you know Mike. you bump into him once or twice.
I'll see you in November, I'm assuming.
Most likely.
Well, Mike, thanks for joining us. I appreciate you coming on and explaining your positions.
Thank you guys very much. Have a great day. Much love to you all.
Much love to you. Enjoy the fight.
So, yeah.
So back to the thing.
So there's a good question on the sidebar here by David Marsh asking him if he supports the big lie. The thing is, it's a problem. I mean, Mike's a good guy, but I mean, he's supporting DeSantis. It just disqualifies him.
Yeah,
that's the problem. The Republicans supporting these guys, Trump, DeSantis, they have to break from them.
When I first started working on this, which is long after you started back in 2013, anybody mentioned the word cannabis in the halls of the Capitol and in Tallahassee, you would find old bald guys running in the opposite direction. I mean, Kathy Jordan, that little frail lady who's got so much feist in her, she scared the heck out of them because they knew exactly what she was going to talk to them about when she came down that hallway, and you would see them bolt at high speed. We've been dealing with a 66% Republican majority.
Yeah.
Since that time.
I have to agree with you, Steve. I can't see cannabis in Florida. I think the biggest part of why we're in where we're in Florida is because our legislator has not represented the will of the people. And I think that's largely come from the conservative side of our legislature. So I really feel that we're not going to be able to go anywhere if we have people in power that are conservative putting this into play. I definitely don't see DeSantis going anywhere with this. The putrid order, he's calling it, he's like, you can't have it because it smells bad. I mean, come on, man. Like, that's like one of the worst excuses that you can have. what happened in Florida was we got medical marijuana, and then it was goddamn expensive. Nobody could open up a dispensary. Nobody could partake in it. Nobody can grow at home. And we're never going to see any of those things change while we have conservatives in power. Here's the problem, though, Steve, is first off, DeSantis redistricted everything. Everything's kind of leaning conservative now. And second, we've had a lot of people move into the state that I think are leaning towards the conservative side. They wanted to live in DeSantis, Florida. They wanted to live in a Florida that, you know, doesn't force you to wear masks and, you know, things like that.
Yeah,
So-
medical tyranny. It's actually impossible.
So I think we need to find Republicans that support it, because I think we're going to skew Republican for a very long time. I might be wrong. You can call me an idiot right now if you want to, but
I thought that was my job.
and I definitely don't want Republicans in power in here. I've been opposed to conservatives being in power in Florida for a very long time, but I think it's inevitable now.
Well,
And I
you
do
know,
think that Mike feels if you don't get on that side, you can't get your word in edgewise.
Yeah.
well, you know, the problem will be, you know, if the House turns Republican in Congress, which is likely, you know, then Nancy Mace will have her say a little bit more. You know, but the problem is that, you know, the bill that Nancy Mace offers is a tame version of the MORE Act. It's you know, it's a scaled down version of that. It's a Republican version. It doesn't include much criminal justice. And the thing that bothers me most about the States Reform Act is that it allows states to opt out. So there's no way you can go from one state to another crossing America in and out of legal and illegal states. That's not legalization.
Yeah.
But isn't Schumer's bill also, from what I understand,
No.
reportedly
No.
have states rights in there?
No, I can't imagine they would allow that.
I mean, it's bad enough we have this patchwork now, but I can still see that happening in regards to gun reform. They got a bill through, not my favorite bill. It's just too weak. It's weak tea.
Well, I mean, it's like leaning in the direction of, you know, states' rights. Okay, you know, the whole abortion thing, which is terrible, throwing it back to the states. I mean, we've accomplished tremendous amount, you know, without federal support for legalization by going state by state. And I still recommend that's what people do. And that's what they're going to be doing come this November, with multiple states having initiatives on the ballot. That's the only way to do it, other than, you know, doing locally, you know, legislatively in states, you know, because the federal government's not going to act.
I definitely you see how California legalized, and I hear a lot of criticism about you know, full legalization happening, but when medical marijuana was legalized, it really happened slowly, and slowly started from a city level, and then several different cities started saying that and then all of a sudden it just seemed like, you know what, we might as well pass this out on state level. I believe 92 San Francisco legalized, right? They had, right, Gary? They came out basically saying that they supported medical marijuana.
96?
No, well, that's Prop 215, but San Francisco did it before the state did it.
Yeah. So that's a big difference in how states are approaching it now. Now it's a ballot initiative. Now we got to get leaders in, you know, I really see the grassroots movement of what happened in California really gone. You know,
it's in a weird way, though, it's the best of both worlds in California. You could go to a store, you can buy from your friend, you know. So I mean, they're saying the black market is holding up illegal, you know, the legal industry, but you know, people make their own choices. They want to go still to their friendly dealer, you know, who gives them a good price. Until they bring the prices down, people are going to go to their friendly dealer with better prices.
Gavin Newsom, is he good for the movement or bad for the movement?
He's great. It's great. I mean, I'm not.
What an awesome question.
Even if people have problems with how things got done in California, it's legal. You can go to a store, and unfortunately, it's expensive. The industry has kind of played out a lot of small, independent people who can't, you know, afford to be in the industry. That's just the nature of this beast that's being created around us. Unfortunately, we want it to be, you know, independent, crafty, and that kind of stuff. But I don't think we're going to get our way. There will be independent and craft, you know, companies out there, but they're not going to dominate the industry. They're going to be like, you know, the small beer companies that fight Budweiser.
I have a friend who grows out in Humboldt, and he tells me that his trucks have to drive around various counties because they can't drive through it, and because of the laws have had patchwork
Because of the
themselves.
the opt-out laws in California, which is part of the reason why they're having, they're not having as much success as they need to, having enough legal, businesses open to compete, therefore people go to their friend.
Yeah. Now, the overlying the arc theme of this month is what have you done since '71? And you've actually been active in this circle since '71. A lot of our listeners weren't even.
I don't take credit for anything going on. 71, I was just a kid.
Yeah, but you were an observer.
And, but active as a smoker, but not active as an advocate. I didn't become an advocate till I worked at HighTimes.
Okay, but what I was asking, who out there was actually doing something after the Controlled Substance Act took place and started the fight back then? That is
normal.
Normal.
Yay.
And that'd be a great questionnaire. Ask 10 questions. Who did that? And you can answer each time. Normal.
Yeah, and this is segueing because you actually did a lot to actually raise money for NORML at one point in time, and actually put together 2 fantastic collections of music called
Hempilation.
See, I was waiting to see who's going to get into that.
Hempilation is a compilation of songs about cannabis that was a benefit album for NORML. It was Hempilation 1, Freedom is Normal. Hempilation 2, Free the Weed. We did so well with the first one, we did a second one. You don't do sequels that often when it comes to those type of projects. Back in the mid 90s, when I was doing all my music editing for HighTimes, I was meeting bands left and right, and almost all the bands generally asked, what can we do to help? And so, okay, you're in the pages of HighTimes. That's a start. You could play a benefit concert. That's cool, but that's local. And I thought, well, what about a benefit album where everybody could get it, all over the country? And there were a bunch of benefit albums happening around that time. I was inspired by a few others. And I went to NORML because HighTimes is very close to NORML. And I said, what do you guys think? And they were interested, anything to raise money for NORML, but they liked the idea in general. At the time, Dick Cowan was the executive director before Keith Straub had come back. And Dick liked the idea. And so they had a staff person named Eric Steenstra, who's with Vote Hemp now, helped me as like the NORML liaison, who was actually brought on board by Steve D'Angelo, who was working with NORML back then and funded Eric working there. So Steve was behind the project as well. And Eric and I teamed up to find a record company that would back us. We found Capricorn Records, the home of Allman Brothers and other great bands of the 70s, but also they had kind of revived the label in the 90s. They had 311, Cake, and Widespread, and a bunch of cool bands. And so we found a really great label to support us, like a family company that Capricorn was. And HighTimes is kind of a little family operation, and NORML is a little operation. So like our 3 little family operations, teamed up to put together this album. And basically, the first one, 1995, was pretty much like collection of songs by groups that were really popular back then. We had Blues Traveler, Black Crowes, Cypress Hill, Widespread. I mean, it's such a great lineup. 311, such a great lineup on that first one. Sublime, Ziggy Marley. It was like a who's who of stoner bands out there.
These are like some of my favorite things.
Yeah, I mean, it was amazing. So we had a blast. So basically, it was me and the team at Capricorn and NORML piecing it together. But it was generally my idea to do it. We found, a good partner. The first one came out. It was interesting. The first one came out and it got a lot of negative attention from the government. And the Lee Brown, who was the drug czar at the time, held up the Hempilation, by the way, and here was the cover, and held up the CD at a meeting of like entertainment executives in LA right after it was released. He said, "This is what's wrong with your industry. You're promoting marijuana to kids." And so that really stirred up sales. We were so thankful. And we had a couple of other bands, like the DEA went into a store in Boston and took all the Hempilations off the shelf. Everybody rushed to Boston to buy some more. So we sold about 125,000 or so for the first one, which is really successful for an album in general, but for a benefit album in particular. So then we went off and did the second one. The second one was a little bit more of a mixed bag. We never got Willie Nelson on the first one, so we got him on the second one. And we put that one together, and that one came out in 98. The first one came out in 95. So we raised around upwards of $200,000 for NORML for those 2 albums over those 3-4 year period.
And where can you still find the albums or get them online?
They're
if at all
online.
possible?
You know, they're on. You know, they put out a lot of them, so they're not like super collector's items. So they, you know, you could buy them for $5 or something on Amazon.
Very cool.
Yeah, 'cause that's a good thing to have. And CD sales are slumping because everybody can download everything here and there.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's why I put them all out on. We had the 25th anniversary a few years ago, and one thing that kind of bothered me was that there are 37 songs from the 2 albums, and most of them were not available on YouTube, or the more obscure numbers weren't available. So, you know, the more popular numbers like Blues Traveler doing "I Want to Take You Higher," you know, that was, you know, available, but a lot of the lesser tracks weren't, or the bands that are lesser known. So me and a friend put together a YouTube site a couple of years ago and put them all up in one place. So now everybody
Very
can find them.
It's interesting that the government got involved and actually boosted sales. I think the same kind of thing happened when Frank Zappa went to Congress to talk about explicit lyrics. I think his sales went straight to the roof after that too, even all of his old albums.
That day when the drug czar said that, I was at HighTimes. We got a call from NBC and they wanted to interview me. Next thing you know, I'm boning up on a question, you know, and how to answer. Ultimately, you know, the only thing they used from me was that, you know, this is for adults, it's not for kids, and nothing to worry about, kind of thing. You know, it was like this issue about catering to kids. I don't know, music, kids. I don't know. This was not an album for kids. It was an album for, you know, for young adults and, you know, people in their 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s. You know, it wasn't necessarily an album for teenagers. If you wanted to get it, we're fine with that too. You know, but that's not what we were targeting.
So, Steve, I wanted to thank you today for coming on to the show. Thank you for everything that you've done. You've been, you know, you corrected us earlier. You haven't been in the game as long as we thought, but you've been still pumping out activism longer than any of us have. So, thank you so much. Thank you for all the work that you've done. Why don't you take a moment before we end the show and go ahead, look in the camera, and tell people how they can find you and you know, how they can support you.
Well, go to celebstoner.com, my website, where we're posting articles every day, something new, whether it's a news story or a review of something significant that you might be interested in. Keep an eye on what's going on in cannabis culture via Celeb Stoner. And we're very active on Facebook and Twitter. So I recommend going to our Celeb Stoner group. It's a really great group there. And finally, I have a group on Patreon, the Celeb Stoner group on Patreon. I really highly recommend people joining that. I send out a couple of newsletters a week. It's really insider info from Steve Bloom.
Fantastic. And Tom Angel, yeah, are you listening? We want you on today too. Otherwise, Celeb Stoner is just going to take off and you're going to stay in the dirt.
Tom's the man behind the curtain.
Very
He's
cool
got to come
stuff.
out from the curtain and get on the show, but that's another issue.
Interview Kyle Jaeger. He's, you know, he's more, you know, accessible. You know, he writes all their articles.
Well, we got to have you come back on, and next time bring Willie Nelson. That would be really cool.
Well, you didn't ask. Now I know.
Well, Gary, how can they get one of those cool gold pins on your lapel there?
Oh, this one right here.
Yeah.
This one, by the way, is great. I often tell folks at the supermarket, if they're into it, that this is actually a maple leaf, and I'm Canadian. But generally, I tell them, you know something? You too can be a member of NORML. And in general, Suncoast NORML is the most politically active chapter here in the state of Florida. And you can be a member for a sheer $25 going to suncoastnormal.org/membership. And you can get this cool pen. You can get the card because you'll be a card carrying member, and you will also get into the OnlyFans of cannabis right here at Suncoast NORML and get involved with the politics, because we are making changes. We are putting dents in the armor of prohibition, and you can be part of that too.
And thank you, everybody. Thank you. Bye.
Great show.